Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual, and as usual, I will remind you to join the mailing list just in case YouTube cuts me off or something like that. I will email you, and also I will be sending a weekly newsletter. I've already started. Number 1 has been sent, and number 2 is being worked on right now, so that should be fun. As well, you can join in the conversation. We have quite a robust and active forum, so join us in there. I've noticed it's a little sluggish lately. I fixed the email issue. I'm working on some other things. I could... If let me know if it's sluggish, if you think that it's sluggish. I will upgrade some things if you think it's sluggish. Let me know. Also, somebody sent me in the forum an extension that stops my tabs going to sleep. So I'm workshopping it today. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm installing this right now before I do my show. So I've pushed the button that it's supposed to not let the Twitter tabs go to sleep. So this could be a game changer. Okay, let's get into the news. Sophie Gregory Trudeau wants to teach yoga. So she's doing it to the Liberals, I guess. Eyes roll as stressed Liberal staffers offered free yoga class led by Sophie Gregory Trudeau. Who wouldn't want to? Maybe she'll sing? Oh, could you zoom in? Man, that's funny, right? I can't imagine. I worked in schools, so things like this kind of do happen sometimes. But and it's usually another teacher offering something that's worthwhile. But sometimes it's uncomfortable where a VP is offering something like that. And it's ooh, I don't know. And especially because she's not she doesn't have an official role. She's just the prime minister's wife. So it's a little weird, right? It's a little weird. Puts you in an awkward position. Yoga. What is that? Downward dog? Ottawa adds 5 years to end water advisories in First Nations. My MP, Lloyd Longfield, talked a lot, and even going into the 2019 election, he was talking a lot about ending the water advisories, and it was on track to be done by 2021, and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I knew that it wasn't. I was doing the reading already. They knew in 2019, before the election, that they were going to miss that target, and people were questioning them, and they were just, Liberals don't answer questions they don't like, right? So they don't say anything. And because they don't say anything, people just assume that they're not lying liars. And then they get disappointed when, oh yeah, we'll do it in a term and a bit, right? After we've not done anything for the next 4 years, we'll promise that we'll do something this year. That's an election year, whatever. And then we'll not do anything. So look forward to not having any meaningful movement on this file anytime soon. Anytime soon at all. Yeah, see? It was going to go to sleep and it didn't. Good job. Thank you, everyone. Or thank you. Oh my goodness, I should call you out. Hold on. I'm going to go find out who it is. The user's name was Jack, but it sounds like a full real name, so I'm not going to call him out like that on here. But thank you, Jack. I appreciate it, dude. Okay, anyway, Dan Albus is responding to Christy Kirup, and Christy says the Prime Minister says the conservatives are playing extremely aggressive partisan games with the issue of sexual misconduct in the military. It's the Conservatives' fault. The Liberal government has faced criticism for opposition parties over handling of 2018 allegations involving former CDS Jonathan Vance. It's very kind of muddy if that's all the information that you get, right? Jonathan Vance fathered 2 children with a subordinate, and it was overlooked while they were trying to bury Mark Norman. Right. And then Vance was given a promotion, and pretty much everybody in the upper echelon of the military knew about all of this, and nobody did anything. And they're saying it's the Conservatives, right? Katie Telford knew, and the Conservatives are saying, you have to fire the chief of staff. It's a political, it's a move that's trying to get Justin Trudeau to admit that he knew, right? That's what the goal is here. It's not, I don't think they're actually going after Telford, but it doesn't play well. And it is a situation that, they're trying to spin. They being the Liberals, they're trying to spin it to be bad for the Conservatives. And the Conservatives are giving them lots and lots and lots of ability to do this, right? It's an interesting tactic to go after Telford, right? The lone woman in this tangled web of Vance, Syjan, and Justin Trudeau, right? It's the chief of staff's fault, Katie Telford. It is her fault, clearly, right? Right. Dan Alva says, his defense minister looked the other way when presented with evidence of sexual misconduct against women in our forces. After 5 years of failing to do anything, what is the prime minister's expectation as the leader of a self-professed feminist government that protects powerful men over women? Right. Yep. There you go. Like the Wee scandal, says Shannon Stubbs, the billionaire Island scandal, the SNC Lavalin scandal, the Trudeau Liberals again involved in another massive cover-up operation. Have you had enough of the Liberals' endless deny, delay, deflect delay tactics. And this is Liberals fear shedding of their feminist credentials at the defense. This is again about Saijan and the military protection of the malfeasing men. Right? The feminist government just ignores that. Just let's paper over that. No scandals, right? No scandals. None. Not this Liberal government. Here is Leanne Rude, and she says, my office has been overwhelmed with calls and emails from constituents who are furious about Bill C-10. She's an MP she's a Conservative MP for
furious about Bill C-10.
Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. And so she's talking about C-10. So hold on. I may actually put this into a different category. Hold on. Nope, this is the only story about the free speech in Bill C-10 today. So usually I have that separated out. So I thought that's weird. I thought I had another one. Anyway, regardless, this is constituents who are fighting back. These are people who are fighting for answers. I don't know if it'll be enough. The Liberals are... The expectation usually when you have a minister or something come out like what happened with Saijan, and usually that's a big deal. Usually the press would be all over that, right? Like the chief of staff to the prime minister knew, the minister knew for years, the guy was promoted. It's a big scandal. It's a big scandal by any measure, right? But they're not covering it honestly, I guess. And they're really, again, when you have to understand two things, three things, too much. Two things, maybe. And this is like you have to understand what's happened, et cetera, et cetera. So unless there's a big push, they're not going to change it. Same with Bill C-10. So like Saijan, they just ignore it, right? Like they're just going to ignore it. Same with Bill C-10. Like there's a big pushback, they're just going to ignore it. Or they're going to back down and they're going to wait until they go through an election and then they'll bring it back. And then it'll be even worse. It'll be even worse. I hope I'm wrong. Okay, here's Bill C-10. Here we go.
Speaker, my office has been inundated with calls and emails from constituents who are furious about Bill C-10, and for good reason. By rejecting an exemption that would have protected them and their social media posts from the long arm of the CRTC, this government is taking away their charter rights of freedom of speech and expression. Now, I know the Prime Minister admires basic dictatorships, but my constituents do not. So, Mr. Speaker, why is this government feeling so threatened by Canadians' rights to free speech?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our artists are among the Canadians who've been hurt the hardest by the pandemic. They're suffering financially and mentally. C-10 brought them the hope that things would get better soon, with the promise of forcing Web Giant to invest in our stories and music. Now the Conservatives are stalling C-10, siding with Web Giants against Canadian artists and creators who are deprived of hundreds of millions of dollars. Why is this Conservative Party siding with Google?
Isn't that incredible? What a flip, right? What a flip. It's very interesting saying you as a government are attacking our freedom of speech rights. And he says you conservatives are siding with Google against the creators. I'll tell you, Mr. Gellibo, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. It's hundreds of millions of dollars? Ha! Hardly, sir. Hardly. Get real. This guy is willing to tell you anything to push his objective. That's it. And what a spin. What a spin. It's not even unbelievable because it's totally like I expect it. I expect it from this government at this point, right? I'm surprised they're not spinning it more. The province, okay, this is a Toronto City Councillor, and I think this is interesting and leading into some reporting on schools. Community advocate and city councillor for Toronto's St. Paul's, supporting residents' priorities with a thoughtful, independent, and facts-based approach. Okay. He says the province's decision to continue shuttering outdoor recreation isn't science-based and is unhelpful in so many ways. It's actually harmful. The government should be encouraging people to get outside with options for outdoor recreation rather than gathering indoors. So he's saying this is crazy. So at least there are people, and no matter when you play the COVID game, you kind of lose, but there are at least people who are speaking up and saying like, this doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense. We're going to get into the lockdowns in the redacted portion of this show. And I'll show you, like, there's a whole bunch of lockdowns rolling out all over Canada. Right on time. Very interesting. Very interesting. But anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there when we go to the other part of the show. Education, schools. Education Minister Stephen Lisi is asked when and if students may return to in-class learning. There's no clear answer. He talks about how students can do remote learning only as an option come September. Interesting. They're selling this remote learning as a full replacement for school. Many see the impact on youth's education as an inconvenience or a transition phase and claim they're resilient and will bounce back. Possible, yes, after a few weeks of disruption to get over mono or heal a fracture, but with normal life totally deconstructed for over a year. The Canadian Pediatric Society put out a tweet, and it's an article as well, but this is what he's reacting to. He says more and more students, or the Canadian Pediatric Society says more and more students are disengaging from school, mostly because of the difficulty of spending hours online and the heightened instability of switching back and forth between in-class and online learning. And there's a lot of parents who are just letting their kids check out of school. There are people who are figuring out their own learning pods more and more. This is a blessing in disguise. The round the bend prison that Ontario has implemented in school is offensive to anybody who worked in education and understands what it is to have kids that you are responsible for. Because if you do the job well, then they're your kids too, right? And I hope anybody who's worked in education knows what I mean. And anybody who's worked with kids knows what I mean, right? And they become yours. You have to look out for them, right? And that is part of the job, whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, don't get into the job, right? And so thank goodness we're not in a situation where the kids are going to school and they're being forced to wear masks and they're being forced to not speak unless they have their faces covered, and they're being forced to sit in rows, and they're being forced in some cases to play in circles. And if I talk more, YouTube is going to ding me. They already ding me. But you get my point. I'm glad that this is a small mercy that the kids are not being abused en masse like this. And I think that there is a value to the public school, but we've gone around the bend. We've crossed. It used to be some balance. You could put up with some garbage to get the benefits of socialization or whatever. But now parents are being forced to figure it out for themselves. And between the lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of access to the judiciary, lack of access to city facilities, etc., what are we paying taxes for, right? We're paying taxes to pay the teachers to sit online? Really? I do more work online. Just with this, I don't know. My goodness. And I mean, it's not like this doesn't take time to prep, right? And I'm not saying that I'm a teacher or anything like that. That's not it. But I think it's folly to pay paid people who are meant to be teachers. And teaching is a lot more than just sitting in front of a computer doing the equivalent of a YouTube video. It's more than logging into a Google Meet. It's supervising lunch hours. It's supervising recess. It's talking about your kids. It's talking about how well they're doing. It's charting their progress socially and emotionally and academically. And it's liaising with parents. There's so much more to it. And it's being boiled down to we're keeping your kids safe when I mean, it's not. There's so much more to the story that we're not even privy to. And the school boards are controlling and the unions are controlling what the teachers and what the principals and what everybody can talk about. We're in such a bad situation that even if you did try to stand up for your kids, you would be making yourself an outcast in your job. You would be making yourself somebody who needs to be dealt with. They'd shuffle you out as soon as they could, right? If you couldn't wear a mask or something. They've already got a way to deal with that, right? No, you can't wear a mask. You teach online, no problem. They're redefining education, and it's awful and it's terrible and it's not good for the kids. But it's not good for the kids to be in a prison either. It's not good for the kids to be indoctrinated 24/7 with useless indoctrination, which is what's happening. So small mercies, right? Small silver linings. And I don't think the government realizes they're well behind the curve on this. I don't think the government is realizing that if they pull this crap for more time, more kids are going to disengage. Their numbers are going to crater, and they're going to, well, I don't know what's next. So I don't know what's next. But I feel like when governments can't deliver a service, we shouldn't be paying for that service. And when governments are instead delivering an indoctrination process instead of an education, that's a problem that needs to be addressed, but we don't have a mechanism to address it. Like the Board of Education and the trustees, they're all fully on board with this. They're all fully on board with critical race theory too, and any thinking person would realize that it's racist. Like out and out blatant racism, right? Exclusionary racism. Anyway, regardless, let's move on. Here is the U.S. fertility rate fell to a record low in 2020. Isn't that concerning? Don't you think that's concerning? Do you think this year's better? Do you think more people are having babies this year? I didn't look, but I imagine that Canada is having similar numbers, which is not good. Fertility rates in the West have been historically low. Even during the Great Depression, I did a video on this years ago, and you could probably find it in the archive if you look. But during the Great Depression, there was people had between 2 and 3 kids, and after the Great Depression, it went up to between 3 and 4 again and across Canada until it fell in the 60s. Why did it fall in the 60s? The introduction of the birth control pill. Since the birth control pill, it's been on a steady decline. I think we were at 1.3 the last time I looked, 1.3 children per household, right? Which is not replacement. And in order to get replacement, you need 2, right? If you have a mom and a dad, which you do, you need to have 2 babies for that pair to replace that pair, right? Unless you do that, then your population is declining, unless you supplement from somewhere else, right? So things to think about, things to consider. It's very interesting what's going on in our country and what's being accelerated with the excuse of the pandemic. Here's some good news. Good news, everybody, and really like good news. It says U.S. highly unlikely to order Line 5 shutdown as deadline on crucial pipeline nears, chief negotiator says. What do you think would happen if that headline said U.S. highly likely to order Line 5 shutdown? Do you think there might be a run on gas coming up to the 12th? Do you think people might panic? Do you think people might start figuring out flights and other things if people are saying, you know, this Whitmer thing's looking really like it's going to go south, eh? And then somebody else says, yeah, I mean, maybe we should tell everybody. Did they tell everybody just before they were going to lock down? Nobody knows until everybody knows, right? Don't panic, everybody. Everything's fine. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the press is above board and telling the truth, right? He said the valves are unlikely to be shut off next week. Such a move would require a confirmatory order by a federal or state level judge. Somebody would need to confirm it. You know, it's probably not going to happen next week. Don't worry about it, guys. I'm crossing my fingers that the press is not misleading us for purposes that we can't see at this point in time or whatever, right? But I've lived in the world since 2016, and I've put my faith in the press and then been burned, right? Darn you, CNN. So, cautiously optimistic that, well, who knows? I said yesterday, they're just as likely to shut it down and then put it through legal battles as they are to leave it on and put it through through years of legal challenges. So I'm hoping that the current status quo is crisis enough for everybody, and we don't need to add another crisis, right? Like that would be great if we could just deal with the current crises and not add a gas shortage. That would be wonderful. Because if you add a gas shortage, then everything else increases in price. Then you've got people who have the means who leave the province, and regardless of whether they go to the States or somewhere else in Canada, somewhere that's not experiencing gas shortages, you get a reduction in all sorts of income for the province. And then there's all sorts of negative outcomes. Okay, let's move on to China. It's not good. So let's just deal with this crisis and not have an extra crisis. That would be great. Here is Canaditude, and he says how to spot a CCP agent teaching in a Canadian university. I'm going to play Mr. Genius's question at the beginning here, and it's 2 minutes. It's all worth the watch. But this is this is a professor at a Canadian university answering Canadian parliamentarians' questions. Here we go.
Mr. Lee, my colleagues have raised the fact that many witnesses have told us that Confucius Institutes are a front for espionage. You have told us that at least the Confucius Institute at Carleton is not, but you've also been unwilling to contradict the party line on any issue, such as in response to my questions about human rights abuses or the Dalai Lama. This makes me wonder if your employment status would be at risk if you criticize the Chinese government. So I want to put this to the test here. Mr. Lee, based on your bio, you were living in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. The Chinese Red Cross estimates that over 2,500 students peacefully protesting were shot in cold blood. So as someone who today works with students at a university, do you believe that these figures are accurate? And do you think the Chinese state was wrong to sanction the opening of fire on peaceful protesters?
Thank you, sir. And I am the employee of Carleton University, and my employment is with Carleton, and I don't think it's anything to do with China.
Mr. Lee, would you like to respond to my question about the Tiananmen Square massacre?
Sorry, what's your question again?
In 1980.
Spoiler alert, he does not respond to the question about the Tiananmen Square. He just dances around it. He does not respond. You can watch the rest of it. But by the end, Mr. Genius rephrases just directly to ask about the Tiananmen Square, and Mr. Lee refuses to answer. So what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? It's very interesting what is happening across the world. And if you're paying attention, it's written all over the place, right? Mr. Terry Glavin is talking about, Holly Doan is saying, reporters who do not see themselves as racist are responsible for half-truths that blame Asian investors for urban house prices, says Senator Yen Pao Wow. Sorry, I forgot that wrong. Yen Pao Wu. Sorry, I got that wrong. Cabinet has approved $175 million a year equity tax on offshore speculators, Blacklocks. And Terry Glavin says the senator, who was appointed because of his association with skeezy deals attracting mainland Chinese capital to YRV, says it's racist to notice that YRV's dysfunctional housing prices are partly a function of skeezy deals attracting mainland Chinese capital to Vancouver. So interesting, right? Interesting situations. I was talking with some other people about what's going on around Vancouver housing prices, the Vancouver method, and some people hadn't heard of it. I thought, oh wow, you'll find some people who are interested and just never heard about it before. Interesting, right? Anyway, you don't know where you'll find people who are interested and haven't heard of it before. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, Jimmy the Spud says, Canadian Supreme Court have accepted the case for crimes against humanity presented by Dr. Rainier Fulmich. I hope I got that right. Kennedy Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Dolores Cathill. This is massive. If this is accepted by one Supreme Court, the case has to be accepted by all countries. I have the PDF, and he's got a link to the PDF. So that's an interesting situation. So that's the big one that names a whole bunch of people who, it's the same lawyer, I think, as the Elders Without Borders. And so, yeah, it's exciting. My concern and my hesitation always in this kind of situation is if the Supreme Court takes it and then sets a precedent of, yes, these rights should be suspended in this case because X, Y, Z, then that's not so good. But I mean, you need the litigation. And I don't think any of this passes the charter, passes the Oakes test or anything like that. So regardless, it needs to be seen. I'm glad the Supreme Court is taking it up. But I'm concerned about our judicial process. I'm concerned about the choices that our judges will make. There's a former Supreme Court judge that came out in support of an internet censorship bill, talking about taking, having the power to order sites to be taken down within 24 hours. I don't support any of that, and I don't know how anybody could read the charter and support anything like that. I think that that's total folly. I don't think that it's good. I don't think that I don't think that it makes logical sense. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see how this works out. A group of active and retired police officers from several forces have launched a legal challenge over Ontario's pandemic orders, alleging that enforcing the rules requires officers to breach their oath and to uphold to breach their oath to uphold the Constitution. And here are the officers, and here's a quick interview, and I'll play it all. No, it's just a minute, but Joe Warmington is interviewing them, and he says both York Constable Chris Vanderbrose and Toronto Police Sergeant Julie Evans say their oath to the Constitution is bigger than breaking people's charter rights over pandemic enforcement. As lawyer Rocco Gelati says, their integrity is intact. He says it's an honor to represent them. So here's their story.
I think it's safe to say that both of your careers are on the ropes, if you will. You're in hot water with the authorities of York Regional Police and Toronto Police. And that can't feel good for police officers to be in this situation. Tell me about that, and why are you doing this? Because it would be much easier just to kind of fold in and just kind of get along. You have families, you're young, your careers are on the line here.
Well, I think it's an easy question to answer, Joe, because what it comes down to for me is my oath stands, and that oath is to the people. It is to protect the people, to stand for the greater good of the people. And if that is no longer an applicable facet to my job, then I'm glad to resign, because it's important that I do the right thing. That's why I joined. And I will continue to do that till my dying day, whether it's in the role of a police officer or just a citizen. But this is important.
I think it's safe to.
So I'm glad to have officers like that who are standing for the oath and saying, you know, if this is what we're expected as police officers to do, to put aside the oath and enforce these unconstitutional rules, I'm glad to step down. That's encouraging. That's what you have to do. That's what people should do, and say, no, I'm not doing this, right? And if everybody quits, they don't have anybody to enforce these garbage rules. I don't know that that's a solution. I don't know that that's the right way to fight this. But in this situation, I applaud these two. It's very, very difficult to do what they've done, and I hope they win. I hope they make some meaningful headway against this tyranny, because that's what it is. All right, we're going to head over to Redacted. So for people who want to just stay on YouTube, that's no problem. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Greg and I recorded one yesterday, so it was lots of fun. You should check it out, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.